Hello and welcome to my top 10 most likely unseen issues for the May 2017 strategic case study on soft drinks manufacturer Fizz. So before we start, I'm just going to go through a bit of an introduction to this particular video and where I've got the information on and what you need to do with said information. So how have I come up with these top 10? Well, first of all, you look at the focus in the pre-scene. If there's a lot of material in the pre-scene on a certain topic, then it's likely that there is some kind of importance of that topic. It's likely to be brought up in the exams. There's more to talk about. And that feeds into the second point here, the degree of importance attached to it by the examiner. But that particular section extends beyond purely what's in the pre-scene, but also what CIMA like to examine. For example, ethics. It may be that there's no real mention of ethics in the case study, but ethics is considered very important by CIMA and therefore they are likely to examine it. Next is the strategic importance. How important is it to the organization? If a certain topic is very important to the company, for example, say their suppliers, if they rely very heavily on a certain supplier, then it's likely that there might be an issue on the supplier. If something were to happen to that supplier, what impact could that have on the business? And also just a more general experience in doing these videos in creating mock exams and reviewing exams in the past, the typical kind of issues that come up and what kind of things have the examiner brought up in the past. And my final point here is about how easy it is to write issues on that subject. The people who write the exams are obviously people too, and they will go for ones that they know, that they can write good questions on. So what do you need to do for these issues? Well, first of all, it's important to prepare key models. So this will be things like your SWOT exam, like SWOT analysis, like your PESTLE analysis. Because building up this information now will help you to adapt the new information given you in the unseen, or help you to have that context to apply the unseen material. Next thing you need to do is practice exam questions on these issues. This will help you to understand the kind of questions that will be asked around these topics and how to answer them. And also, this next section here, it will help you to plan these answers in your mind so that when you go into the exam and you start writing, you'll already have a background in which to apply this new information. You'll already have certain points to bring up in your head as you're writing for them. And I've also put some more generic things here, such as the advantages and disadvantages of these certain topics, where they would be used and how models can be used to support them. So let's move on to the top 10 issues now. So the first issue is issue number 10 on funding. Now, the reason why I've chosen funding as one of my top 10 most likely issues is because it is a key F3 topic. It extends to lots of different subtopics such as equity funding, debt financing, cost of capital, and dividend policies. You remember in the pre-scene that the company was paying out half of its profit in dividends, and whether this is enough, whether they should be paying more to appease shareholders or whether they should be paying slightly less to reinvest more in the business. Now, funding is unlikely to come up as its own specific topic, but it is likely to come up as part of another question. A classic example of this being a new project, be it a new group that they're setting up, a new investment opportunity, a new product, a new soft drink. And of course, they have to figure out how they're going to fund that, whether they have fund available or whether they'll need to raise additional financing and the various options in which that they can do this. And other reasons include the fact that it was mentioned in your CIMA SCS guide, or strategic case study guide by CIMA themselves, that raising money and discussing the ways in which the company can raise additional financing is a key part of the role that you play as in the strategic case study exam. And it's very commonly examined. Most variants or most sittings at least, have had several funding questions in them. So what kinds of likely issues could come up? Well, some that I've already discussed already. We have long-term funding requirements. Now this could be for an acquisition of a competitor or an acquisition of a supplier. Could be for a new project, most likely a new soft drink, or money set aside for organic growth. Now, what this would mean would be, say, raising additional financing to increase production, to increase marketing expenditure, to try and build on the basis that the business already has. And also, with regards to shorter-term working capital. Now, short-term working capital was less likely to be an issue given that the company currently has a negative working capital cycle, which in a sense means that the company is receiving money from its resources before it is paying for them. And so, of course, in that instance, you're less likely to have problems with short-term funding as opposed to a situation where you were paying for your resources long before you were receiving any money from them, which, of course, you would be more likely to run into short-term working capital issues. And now it's most likely to come up as an add-on issue. Again, in various ways that I have already discussed, such as a new project, such as a new strategy, and other things like that, which of course all require additional investment. You're less likely to get a specific question purely asking you to talk about raising finance, but it's very likely to appear. And of course, even if you aren't specifically asked about it, you should be talking about it. You should be thinking, yes, it looks like a good project. Yes, it looks suitable. It looks acceptable for us. It will appease our stakeholders and shareholders, but can we afford it? And if not, how do we raise the additional funding for it? And which of the different ways in which we can do this is the best for the company in this situation? So some key points here arising from the pre-C. So we saw that they only had 10.4 million Northland dollars in the bank. Now, admittedly, this was an increase on last year, but that's still not really that much money when you consider that the business is worth, or the revenue of the business is worth, hundreds of millions of Northland dollars. So it could cost a fortune to bring a new soft drink to market. It could cost a fortune to increase advertising expenditure. So that's not actually that much money to have, as much as it sounds like a lot to you and me. For a business of this size, that's not that much money to invest, particularly given that that is just in cash and cash equivalents, and therefore will not be completely usable. There will be some of it that's needed for working capital, such as trade payables, and cash for other monthly expenditures, such as wages. So limited cash around. And we also have to think about the importance of cash flow budgeting. Now, we saw that the revenue and the profits were decreasing this year compared from last year. That's not to say that it's always been like that. It's not to say that it will happen again. But if that trend were to continue, at least in the medium term, say for 4 or 5 years, it could be that we have to plan for years where we make a loss, and therefore we need cash available as a barrier to keep the business afloat, to wait for it to turn around. But with regards to debt financing, there perhaps is room for extra debt financing, extra debt funding, because of the gearing level at only 12%. Again, a bit of an increase on last year, but this is still very low. It means that we are only 12% financed by debt. The rest comes from equity. This was a lot lower than the gearing ratio for Quench. So it shows that we are perhaps in a good position. And in addition to raising additional debt financing, perhaps from pure bank loans, we also have a lot of assets that we can use to raise debt against as security, because of course the bank won't just give us the money. They want some assurance that they will get their money back. And if we take out our intangible assets, we still have 116 million Northland dollars in tangible assets, in non-current assets that we can use to raise additional finance against. And so this is my suggested order of raising funds, as in which one we should try to use as the plan A, as the first choice, and that is to use the cash that we have available, at 10.4 million. Now, obviously, this will not be enough for maybe some of the larger projects, but if there are small things that only cost less than $1 million Northland dollars or a couple of million Northland dollars, the best use of money would be to use the cash and cash equivalents for that, because of course that is money that isn't costing us anything, unlike debt financing and like equity financing, which in a sense costs us something in the long run. Next one is debt financing, because it's generally quicker, easier and cheaper than equity financing. The downside, of course, being that we do have to pay it back, unlike additional equity financing, where we can choose not to pay dividends if we wish. And so we would use our asset bases and a bank to raise additional financing. And of course, because we have a low gearing ratio, will we be perceived as less risky than, say, a company with a very high gearing ratio. And finally, equity. Now, equity is usually last because of the cost and the time scale. But for an incredibly expensive project, such as setting up new factories overseas that could cost hundreds of millions of Northland dollars, this would be the only option, because we wouldn't necessarily have enough assets to raise that kind of debt financing, and we certainly wouldn't have enough cash available for it. And the various theories that you can use when talking about funding, of course, the advantages of debt and equity. Debt is quicker. Debt is generally cheaper. And with equity, of course, whilst it's the opposite of that, it is more expensive, you do not necessarily have to pay the funds back. Your dividend payments are optional. However, you have to think about the signaling effect by dividend payments. You also have to think about what stakeholders want. Stakeholders who are perhaps employed will want to gain in equity through the value of the share price increasing, whereas shareholders who are maybe retired will want dividends as a form of income. And of course, all major shareholders and banks and lenders can be positioned nicely on the Mendelow's matrix as well, to show us the level of importance of each one, and therefore affect the way in which we treat them. So issue 9, another big issue, and that's risk management. Again, like funding, it's another question that is likely to come up as an add-on issue. It's likely to be filtered and threaded in between other types of questions. You're less likely to be asked a specific question just on risk management, but you will need to be considering risk management options, considering the risks of everything you do in every question you answer. And again, it's a key P3 topic. It's one of the main P3 topics. And of course, all of the different papers, E3, F3, P3, need to be examined in the strategic case study. It's not a case of it's going to all be E3 questions. So key things could be risk identification, risk management techniques, risk mapping, which of course they've already done in the pre-scene, and risk controls, which again were listed in the risk register. And other reasons why I think this is likely to come up is because it comes up time and time again in most sittings, and also the fact that they've given a significant amount of space in the pre-scene, a couple of pages. 12th of the entire pre-scene was just to do with key risks within the organization. They wouldn't have given you that much information unless they expected you to use it in some way, shape or form. And so your usual issues, such as identifying the key risks in a specific project. It could be if we are going to set up a new factory overseas, what kind of risks will we face there? Will we face risks with cultural differences? Will we face risks with exchange rates? It could be to do with the risk management and control of the business as a whole. or of a specific project, just like in the first one here. You may be asked whether to discuss whether you feel the risk management and risk controls that are in place at the organization are really sufficient. Are they really doing enough to mitigate them? For example, with the changes to currency prices and how they monitored the currency markets as a way of controlling it. Well, is monitoring them really going to benefit you? Is it really going to have an impact on how well you mitigate against the effect of changes in the currency market? Why are they not taking proactive actions, hedging themselves against those changes? And other things to mention here, the kinds of risk management techniques to use, such as the audit committee, which is a key part of corporate governance. We know that they have the right amount of non-executive and executive directors, but there was no mention of the remuneration, nomination and audit committees, which of course is a key part of a solid, well-rounded risk management strategy. And so some of the key points here that you should mention in general, but also key points outlined from the pre-scene. Very competitive business. It's a very competitive industry. There are some major competitors such as Quench, perhaps a lack of development at the moment. There were a lot of different categories within the soft drinks market when we were looking at the pre-scene, looking at those different pie charts. A lot of drinks categories in which Fizz does currently not have a presence. Strategy as well. They mentioned that whilst they did have strategies and they were good strategies, they actually mentioned in their strategies that there were significant risks that the company was facing, such as the drop and change in public perception of soft drinks due to high levels of sugar. And that leads to these two potential problems here of people protesting soft drinks manufacturers because of the blame that is being placed at their door in the newspapers for the rising obesity epidemic, the rise in diabetes, the rise in cancer. And of course, what kind of impact would a sugar tax or a rise in the tax on soft drinks, etc., what would that have? What impact would that have on the organization? It's a company that makes nothing but high sugar drinks. The fact that it costs the consumer more money to buy a particular drink could lead to a decrease in sales, which of course will lead to a decrease in profit and lead to further instances of falling profits. Another risk I've mentioned here is delivery risks. That was specifically mentioned in the risk register, and it's also one where they perhaps could do more to mitigate. For example, they are a soft drinks manufacturing company, not a delivery service. So a lot of major manufacturers, even ones that were easily large enough to have their own delivery service, their own fleet of lorries and vans, tend to outsource the logistics side of it. They outsource the delivery because they know that a specialist delivery service is going to be more adept. That's one of their core competencies, whereas our core competence is our ability to make soft drinks. And you're also transferring the risk as well, because if you mess up your delivery and you're responsible for your delivery, then you pay the price. If you entrust a specialist delivery service to do it and they mess it up, then whatever actions come back against you, you can claim back against the delivery service. And also changes in consumer trends, again tying to the sugar tax, tying to the changes in the social fabric of Northland, the social fabric of the world as well, people becoming more and more health conscious. Social media has given people the ability to share information and learn things far more freely, and thus we're becoming more and more aware of the things that we do. We're becoming more aware of the products that we put into our bodies. And other key bits here as well, the importance of risk and installing a culture of mitigating risks, of making sure you identify and reduce risk, how that benefits the organization as a whole. It's always better to be proactive than reactive when it comes to dealing with risk. And the various traditional methods or theories that you can use when talking about risk include obviously the COSO risk methodology, as we can see here in the grid that I've put up for you, but also the TARA risk management, the transfer, accept, reduce and avoid. The good thing about this is that if you are faced with a particular project or faced with a particular risk, you can tick off these 4 things by going through them, suggesting ways they could transfer, suggesting ways they could accept the risk, or you would just accept the risk, or the ways in which you would reduce the risk, or ways in which you could avoid the risk, and then you can conclude which one is the best action to take. Because of course another part of the strategic case study is about being assertive. It's about showing the examiner that you are someone who can think strategically, you can think with regard to the bigger picture, the helicopter factor, as it were, and make an informed, rational decision. Because unlike at operational management level, you are no longer simply putting information together to give to higher ups to make the decisions. You are now responsible for making those decisions yourself. And other risk management tools here, such as risk mapping, which of course we know is useful to quote because of course they've already done it in the precinct for us, and also issues with the audit committee and whether they have one, and if they don't, they should have one, and if they have one, is it being effectively utilized? Because of course that is a key part of corporate governance. So I hope you've enjoyed this sample video and more importantly found it useful. Before I go, I'd like to quickly tell you about a few of the products that we do here at Astranti Financial Training, specifically for our case study courses. We have a study text which details all the key theories in which you will be expected to use in your case study exam, as well as details of how to approach the pre-scene and the case study. We also have a series of course videos detailing how to answer case study questions. This is actually an area in which many students struggle. Most of the scripts that I've seen, the failing scripts that I've seen, has actually been due to poor case study technique rather than lack of knowledge. We also have a series of pre-scene analysis videos based on the current up-to-date pre-scene, detailing all the key bits of information and likely issues you may face in the exam. Next up is the industry analysis, a pack detailing information about the industry that the pre-scene company resides in, information about the key players within that industry, and more background information on the industry in general. We also have a range of mock exams created for each level and based on the current pre-scene, which is a great way to get some practice in before you sit the real thing. We also offer marking and feedback on those mock exams so you can see where you are going wrong and where you can improve. Finally, we have the master classes. These are 2 one-day classes taken by our expert tutors to give you all the hints and tips you need to really add to your chances of passing the exam. Also, if you take our full course, we offer a pass guarantee, which, provided you have met all the requirements of the pass guarantee, you will get a free resit on the next exam should you fail to pass. So once again, thank you for your time. If you're interested in any of these products, please visit the website www.astranti.com for more information. Thank you.